The confetti hadn't stopped falling when the screaming began. Knee-deep in holographic streamers, Sarah blinked at the giant screen dominating her studio apartment. Her face, frozen in ecstatic shock, looked 10 years older than her 25. Then the name faded, replaced by the logo of Galactic Cruise, and that's when the sound system kicked in. Grand prize winner of the ultimate galactic getaway, Sarah Linden. She screamed because after years of entering pointless contests, she'd actually won. 6 months of intergalactic travel on the luxury cruiser Starlight Serenade, first-class treatment, gourmet alien cuisine, and stops at 5 of the galaxy's hottest tourist planets. It sounded like paradise in this crummy apartment, with its flickering lights and roach problems the size of small dogs. Now, Sarah wasn't so sure. Boarding commences in T-minus 20 hours, the chipper announcer informed her. Please report to Bay 14 for security clearance. And Ms. Linden, congratulations. Bay 14 turned out to be a broom closet masquerading as a spaceport. Wedged between 2 rusting cargo haulers was a ship that looked like a cosmic pigeon had taken a miserable dump. There were no sleek lines, no shimmering force field, just dented grey metal and windows in desperate need of a squeegee. "Uh-oh," came a nasal voice from behind Sarah. She whipped around and then stifled a gasp. The speaker was about 4 feet tall, mostly snout, with 2 beady, suspicious eyes. A furry tail twitched beneath its ill-fitting jumpsuit. "Problem?" asked Sarah. "I've just never seen a ship like this," the creature replied. "My name's Krill, mechanic/stowaway. You must be the lucky winner." Its voice dripped with something that wasn't exactly envy. A knot formed in Sarah's stomach. This alien looked like a used car salesman, the shifty kind who'd sell your organs behind a gas station. She'd expected a champagne reception, maybe an alien captain in a crisp uniform. "Don't worry, sweetie," squeaked a new voice. "Sometimes the real gems are the ones you have to polish up a bit." Swathed in a vibrant caftan that clashed horribly with its bright blue skin, a creature Sarah could only assume was female barreled towards her. 2 mismatched eyes blinked owlishly, and rows of needle-like teeth sparkled in the dim hangar light. "Captain Bess of the Ramblin Rose," the blue alien proclaimed, arms spread wide, "and this sad bucket of bolts is my baby." Krill let out a snort that sounded suspiciously like a curse in some guttural language Sarah had never heard before. Sarah took a wary step backward. "The Starlight Serenade?" she asked, her voice small. Captain Bess burst out laughing, the sound a raucous mix of squeaks and wheezes. "Didn't you read the fine print, honey? Starlight Serenade's down for repairs. The grand prize was transferable to one of our other fine vessels. Now how about we get this show on the road? The stars await." At this point, the stars looked less appealing than a roach dinner back in her apartment. But Sarah was, at her core, a stubborn optimist. Maybe it was an ugly duckling situation. Perhaps the inside of this ship was a glittering wonderland. "Lead the way, Captain," she said, trying for a breezy, flat tone. The interior of the Ramblin Rose did nothing to improve Sarah's mood. Flickering lights cast shadows across worn consoles. The seats in the lounge looked suspiciously like they'd been snagged from an intergalactic junkyard, and the heavy scent of something oily and faintly rotten hung in the air. "Crew quarters, mess hall, engine room," Bess wheezed out between introductions, none of which Sarah could remember 2 seconds later. There was a furry bipedal creature who seemed obsessed with a tangle of multicoloured wires and a hulking 4-armed being in an apron splattered with unidentifiable stains. "You're human," Sarah said, seizing onto the one bit of normalcy. right? Cook, it declared loudly, flashing its considerable teeth. Sarah decided not to inquire about the menu. The tour ended abruptly in what was apparently the bridge. Bess plopped herself into a chair with a pneumatic wheeze, swatting at a control panel haphazardly. "Well, folks, punch in those coordinates and let's get this bird airborne," she boomed. "Captain, you know this thing's got a faulty hyperdrive, leaking fuel cells, and the guidance system's been fried since forever," Krill grumbled. Sarah's carefully constructed optimism cracked. It wasn't just the ugly duckling. This duckling was clearly about to explode. "Look, maybe I should just forfeit. Go home." "Nonsense," chirped Bess, all faux cheer. "Adventures are made of, unexpected detours. What would a little intergalactic escapade be without a dash of excitement?" Sarah glanced wildly at the crew, searching for any sign of shared worry. The multi-armed cook stared blankly at the ceiling. The furry electrician was gnawing on a wrench, and Krill was picking at some kind of scaly fungus growing on the panel. "Caffeinated beverage?" the cook asked, extending a mug-like appendage. It was the colour of rust and smelled vaguely of turpentine. Sarah shook her head, her stomach churning. She needed some space, just a minute, to re-evaluate her life choices. "I'll be right back," she said, her voice high-pitched and tight. The bathroom had to be universal, right? A few minutes in a cramped, smelly space was better than dying in a fiery explosion. 15 minutes later, Sarah was still sitting on the closed lid of what she hoped was a toilet. Through the thin walls, she could hear the Ramblin Rose groaning in protest, followed by Krill cursing fluently in at least 6 languages. This was beyond an unexpected detour. This was a cosmic death trap. A knock rattled the door. "Human, you in there?" Krill's voice asked. Sarah swallowed her panic. "Yeah, give me a minute." "The minute's about up," he informed her. "The captain's fixed on leaving, and those fuel cells aren't improving." Wonderful. Now she had a choice between spontaneous combustion or whatever lurked inside that horrifying coffee mug. With grim determination, Sarah opened the door. Krill thrust the mug back at her. "Changed your mind?" "It's more like I changed my mind about dying," Sarah said with a smile. "Do you have anything edible?" The mechanic snorted, but something in his eyes softened. "There's some fungus jerky in the mess. I reckon it won't kill you faster than this rust bucket." Sarah paused. On the one hand, alien jerky was likely found on the floor, and on the other, the smell of that turpentine coffee substitute was overwhelming. "Lead the way," she sighed. This vacation was getting weirder by the second, and who was she to disappoint destiny, or whatever malevolent cosmic force had dropped her into this mess? It turned out that fungus jerky wasn't entirely terrible. It had the texture of old boot leather, but the taste, it was aggressively bland. Sarah gnawed on a strip, trying to quell the growing anxiety in her stomach. Krill, perched on a battered stool beside her, was munching his ration with considerably more gusto. "So," Sarah began between rubbery bites, "how does one become a galactic mechanic/stowaway?" Krill twitched his snout. "Bad debt. Worse choices," he muttered. "Captain Bess. She's got a heart, but not many credits to her name. She takes on strays, misfits, and folks with nowhere else to go." Sarah glanced towards the bridge, where Captain Bess was wrestling with the controls, a flurry of tentacles and caftan. Krill's voice was kind, but didn't match his gruff exterior. He might look like a shifty salesman, but suddenly, Sarah had a hunch he wasn't the villain of this story. "I won this trip, you know," Sarah blurted out, more to herself than to him. "It's a lottery thing." Krill raised a dubious eyebrow. You? One of those fancy vacation cruises? No offense, but you don't look like the target demographic. Turns out, grand prizes ain't all they're cracked up to be, Sarah sighed. She gestured towards the dented hull around them. Bit of a downgrade from the brochure. Krill snorted, spraying jerky crumbs. Brochure? Bess probably drew that on a napkin while halfway through a bottle of Quorgian moonshine. Lady never met a rule she couldn't bend. A flicker of a grin played on Sarah's lips. So, what happens now? We just fly around until this thing explodes? Krill shrugged. Fix what we can, scavenge what we can't. It's life on the fringe, human. Guess I'm about to get a crash course, Sarah said. There was a strange sort of freedom in it. She didn't imagine herself as a spacefaring mechanic, but here she was. And with the Ramblin Rose's ominous rumble as an accompaniment, it felt less like a death sentence, and more like the beginning of a bizarre adventure. Sarah had barely swallowed the last bit of jerky when the alarm blared, a harsh, insistent wail that made her teeth rattle. Lights flickered in a chaotic pattern, plunging the mess hall into near darkness. "Spirits of the void!" Krill shrieked, leaping off his stool. "Not now! Not after—" His words were cut off as the whole ship shuddered, tossing them both to the floor. Somewhere, something whined in protest, followed by a sound that could only be described as a metallic sneeze. Sarah scrambled to her feet, heart pounding. "What the hell was that?" "Engine trouble. Worst kind," the cook bellowed over the din, his many arms flailing wildly. He lurched towards the exit with surprising agility for a being of his considerable girth. "Gotta seal the core before—" He never finished the sentence. A blinding flash of light erupted from the direction of the engine room, followed by a shockwave that knocked Sarah off her feet again. She hit the floor hard, her vision swimming. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard the unmistakable hiss of escaping gas. Bess erupted onto the bridge like a furious blue typhoon. "Damage report," she screeched, tentacles slapping frantically at the controls. The furry electrician, whose name Sarah still couldn't recall, chittered something through a mouthful of wires, sparks flying from its fur. Krill, face soot-smeared and grim, just shook his head. "We're venting plasma," he yelled. "Another hit like that and the fuel cells go critical, then it's boom time." Sarah clambered up, nausea mixing with a surge of adrenaline. She scanned the bridge, looking for anything, any solution. There had to be something. And there was, in the corner, half hidden behind a stack of what she suspected were overdue bills and takeout flyers, was an emergency kit. It was bright red, dusty, and had the words, "In case of ship-wide malfunction, pray to your preferred deity" stenciled across it. Didn't seem like the most reliable option, but it was better than waiting for the ship to explode. "Hey!" Sarah shouted, grabbing the kit and pushing her way towards the engine room. "I think I found something." Captain Bess wheeled around, multiple eyes fixing on Sarah with a mixture of astonishment and something vaguely resembling hope. "Human, you fixing to do something heroic? Or just running towards your fiery demise?" Sarah ignored her, focusing on Krill. "This help?" she asked, rattling the kit for emphasis. The mechanic squinted, snout twitching. "If that's the old MK5 repair job, it might buy us a few minutes. Maybe." He didn't sound particularly optimistic. "Then that's all we need," Sarah declared, more to bolster her own courage than anything else. Krill shoved her aside, grumbling something about naive idiots. He snatched the kit, peering into its depths with the disdain of a master chef confronted with a microwave dinner. Yet, there was a flicker of something in his eye, a reluctant determination. The engine room was pure chaos. The air crackled with ozone and the stench of burnt metal. Pipes spewed smoke, and what Sarah assumed were crucial-looking panels sparked ominously. The cook was wedged behind a tangle of machinery, multiple arms frantically sealing a leak with alarmingly bright green putty. "Krill!" Sarah yelled. "Where do we start?" He gestured toward a gaping hole in the hull, plasma leaking out like an angry neon waterfall. "That breach needs patching. Kit's got sealant, probably only enough for a temp fix. You distract the captain. I'll do the dangerous bit." Sarah swallowed hard. Distract a chaotic blue alien who was undoubtedly responsible for this mess? Fantastic. But with the alternative being a fiery explosion, her options were limited. "Captain Bess!" Sarah called, forcing a confidence she didn't feel into her voice. "I found a routing manifest. Looks like we've been going the wrong way." It was a blatant lie, but Bess was the kind of gloriously distracted person who might buy it. The caftan-clad alien whirled around. "Wrong way?" she squawked. "Since when are you a navigator?" Krill took this opportunity to lunge towards the breach. Sarah winced as he slapped the sealant on, grunting with the exertion. It seemed to hold for about 3 seconds before it began to sizzle and melt. "Turns out I'm a quick study," Sarah rattled off, waving an imaginary sheet of paper. "Looks like we missed a turn-off. We're heading into a restricted zone." Restricted? The captain seemed to deflate a bit. "Well, that's just not ideal." Sarah held her breath. Krill was frantically wrestling with more sealant, his fur standing on end as sparks rained from above. Another minute. That's all she needed to buy. Sarah was starting to think that maybe she wasn't the luckiest contest winner after all. The sealant was hissing, patches bursting under the relentless plasma stream. Krill was a blur of fur, swearing in a dazzling display of multilingual brilliance. "Can you hurry this up?" Sarah yelled over the racket. "My navigation skills might be a little rusty." "Rusty? They were never forged to begin with," Krill snapped back. The ship groaned in protest, and suddenly a new alarm joined the symphony of disaster. Krill stumbled back, his eyes wide. "They've detected the leak! We've got company, human!" Sure enough, blinking red lights appeared on an ancient-looking sensor display. 3 distinct blips were converging on their position, and fast. Bess was back to full-volume panic. "Restricted zone patrollers. Not only are we broke down, now we'll get blasted to bits by some trigger-happy bureaucrat." "I don't want to die in an intergalactic traffic violation," Sarah wailed. Right on cue, the first comm message crackled through the speakers. A harsh, metallic voice, filled with the self-importance of universal law enforcement officials, echoed through the bridge. "Unidentified vessel. This is Sector Control. You have violated restricted space. Power down and prepare to be boarded." "Boarded? That's the last thing we need!" Krill howled, yanking at a tangle of wires as if this could somehow fix their situation. "Options!" Sarah shouted, trying to be heard over the din. "Do we have any options?" Bess, for all her chaotic energy, seemed to have lost her bluster. She slumped onto her seat, tentacles drooping. The cook had abandoned the engine room and was now rummaging through cupboards, desperately muttering what might be prayers in his native tongue. An idea began to form in Sarah's mind, a desperate, ridiculous idea. Yet, when faced with certain doom, or worse, an intergalactic DMV fine, ridiculous was their best bet. "Captain," Sarah announced, injecting a shaky authority into her voice. "Time for Plan B." Bess blinked 6 separate times, at least That's what Sarah thought counted as a blink on a creature with that many eyes. Human, the only plan B in this situation is spontaneous combustion. We're going to bluff, Sarah said with a determination that surprised even herself. The bridge went silent except for the steady, insistent bleating of various alarms. Krill poked his head up from behind a control panel, a single eyebrow raised in a way that could be interpreted across a dozen species as, "Are you insane?" "Bluff?" the cook asked, four appendages clutching what looked like a chipped teapot. "With what? Expired rations and a hole in the side?" Sarah held up the emergency kit. With ingenuity, a little desperation, and this. She had no idea what was inside, but if the label said prey, it couldn't hurt, right? "Look," she said, trying to channel the commanding tone of movie stars in crisis situations. "They just want a ship breaking regulations. We're going to give them one, but we're going to give them a ship that's just crazy enough they won't want to get near it." Krill snorted, fur rippling. "So crazy I'd probably believe it myself." Sarah gave him her most pleading smile. "Time to go full-on galactic pirates," she declared. "Captain, I need kooky. You've got that in spades. Cook, you're in charge of intimidation. Krill, make this bucket of bolts look like the most dangerous thing in the known universe." Captain Bess, to her everlasting credit, seemed to perk up. A gleam came into her multiple eyes. "Kooky, can do," she declared, reaching for a tangle of mismatched wires. "Now, when they hail us back, this is what you do." 15 chaotic minutes later, the Ramblin Rose, formerly a barely functioning rust bucket, became the scourge of restricted space. Fairy lights pilfered from the captain's quarters blinked ominously across the hull. The emergency kit, opened in desperation, yielded some sort of flare device that spit out noxious purple smoke. The cook, armed with his largest pot and a ladle, stood bellowing incomprehensible threats on the external speakers. The comm system crackled to life again, this time with a hint of nervousness in the controller's voice. "Unidentified vessel. Cease your, shenanigans and identify yourselves." Sarah, taking her cue, pressed the transmission button. "This is Captain Zara, of the, Annihilator," she growled, doing her level best to sound like a sleep-deprived, space-faring lunatic. "We don't take kindly to interruptions." The comms went ominously silent for a long moment. Then, "Captain Zara, please be advised you'll need to—" She cut them off with a squawk worthy of Bess. Another flare sizzled on the hull, adding to their dazzling display. Then, as a glorious finale, Krill hit a switch, plunging half the bridge lights into darkness and sending up a shower of sparks that could have passed for a malfunctioning weapon. "Now, transmit our new ID," Sarah ordered, hoping her voice didn't betray the fact her knees were doing a tap dance under the console. One agonizing minute later, the sector controller's voice returned, shaky and uncertain. "Acknowledged, Annihilator. You seem to be experiencing technical difficulties. We'll maintain a safe distance. Have a pleasant voyage." The comm clicked off. The bridge erupted in a cacophony of cheers, whoops, and what might have been sobbing from the direction of the cook. Sarah slumped into a chair, feeling simultaneously exhilarated and exhausted. It was, by far, the stupidest plan she'd ever been a part of. And it had worked. In the aftermath of their unlikely victory, the Ramblin Rose limped onward. Krill managed a jury-rigged patch that stemmed, if not stopped, the plasma leak. The purple smoke finally dissipated, and the fairy lights were hastily stuffed back into the captain's quarters. Yet, there was a new energy buzzing through the ship. It wasn't optimism exactly, it was more a reckless sort of glee born from staring certain disaster in the face and making it blink first. Captain Bess, in a rare display of efficiency, called a crew meeting in the mess hall. Sarah, despite her initial misgivings, was invited. They sat around the wobbly table, an unlikely band of cast-offs and misfits, with the smell of burnt metal and victory hanging heavy in the air. "So," Bess announced, tentacles waving grandly, "it seems we have stumbled upon a new course and a new identity. The Annihilator," she cackled, a sound Sarah was starting to find oddly endearing. "The name is dumb," Krill grumbled under his breath, but there was the hint of a smirk playing on his snout. "It's certainly—" Sarah searched for the right word. "Memorable." The cook, armed with his trusty ladle, seemed the most enthusiastic of all. He thumped the table, his many eyes gleaming. "Threats! Mayhem! Perhaps a few daring raids! Yes, this suits me!" Sarah couldn't help but grin. Apparently, the old adage, "what doesn't kill you makes you stronger," applied to both people and barely functional spaceships. Here they were, a crew forged in chaos, ready to face whatever the galaxy decided to throw at them next. "Now," Bess continued, a cunning gleam in her eyes. "First order of business. We need a proper captain's hat. Something with feathers, and a skull maybe, for that extra menacing touch. And I'll need more flares," Sarah added, unable to suppress a laugh. "Apparently, those are our secret weapon." Krill snorted, fur rippling. "Don't forget the fairy lights. Can't be a menacing space pirate without festive lighting." This time, Sarah laughed with him. Her grand prize vacation hadn't exactly turned out as expected. There were still undoubtedly 1,000 ways the Ramblin Rose could fall apart, leaving them stranded and at the non-mercy of the universe. But as Sarah looked around at her ragtag crew, a strange sense of excitement filled her. This was just the start of their misadventures. And if they'd survived this much insanity and emerged stronger, well, the galaxy might want to buckle up for more.